Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Chronicles. My name is Sarah, and today I have a very special guest with me. His name is Pat Moffett. He's the author of the book Ice Cream in the Cupboard, and also the author of the book Fortunate Soldier. He is here to talk today about his book and movie Ice Cream in the Cupboard, where it basically follows his life caring for his wife with early onset dementia. Hi, Pat. How are you today?
Okay, I'm well, Sarah. Thanks for having me on today.
Oh no, thank you for coming on. It's a real pleasure. My husband and I watched your movie and we absolutely loved it. Your movie was very powerful. There's a lot to unpack from it. And what made you want to do this? What made you want to get the story out there?
Well, the original situation with my wife, people asked me what was the first sign that something was really wrong, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you the whole story if it's okay.
Yes.
And we seemed to be bickering a lot, but she seemed to be climbing all over me about everything, in our house, and things weren't right. So I decided that I said, let's have a romantic weekend in Puerto Rico. My wife was Puerto Rican, so I thought it'd be a nice time to get away. And we went to Puerto Rico, and she was still kind of irritated on the plane. She just didn't seem to be quite right. And we went down, and then we were having dinner at a very nice restaurant, kind of a two-story restaurant with a nice veranda. And I was looking over the side of the railing and admiring some of these 1955, 57 Chevys and Fords and how long cars last in Puerto Rico because of the constant temperature being warm. And as I turned back to her, we had already ordered steak and lobster, and she threw the entire plate of steak and lobster in my face.
Oh my gosh.
So I was thrown out of the table. I hit my head on the table behind us, and she ran out of the restaurant.
Oh.
So I got up. I tried to pay the bill. They said, "It's okay. Don't worry about it. Just go to your wife." And so she was going down the main drag. She had gotten the distance from me by all this time. And so I was running after her, and then I realized the police were following me. So I kind of caught up to her, and she was still very irritated, saying all kinds of crazy things. And I convinced the police that we were okay. I just said we had too much to drink. Meanwhile, we had nothing to drink. And I got her back to the hotel, and she laid down. This is 6, 7 o'clock at night. And she went to sleep. And I went out on the terrace, and I had 3 of the fastest beers I think I've had in my life. I was shaking. And don't forget, our ages at this time is I was 49 and she was 53. We were both very young.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe where this behavior came from. Well, within 20 minutes, she walked out on the terrace and said, "Honey, I am starved. What are we going to eat?" And I said, "I tried that, Carmen, and you threw your food at me." And she said, "That's ridiculous." She said, "You have to stop joking around about stuff like this. That's pretty serious. I would never do anything like that. And by the way, how did you get your shirt so messed up?" So there was nothing that she remembered about that whole entire traumatic event 30, 40 minutes before.
Yeah.
And on the next day, I was out of Puerto Rico. I got out. I got plane tickets and got out of town and got back to New York. And we had, she was still, behavior was still very erratic, and forgetfulness now was starting to seep in. And I just said, I have to get, she refused to go to a doctor. "I'm fine. There's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me." So I said, I just thought to myself, if I have to throw a net over her and put her in the trunk of the car tomorrow, I got to get her to a doctor. Well, the next day, she was working at the school system anyway, the elementary school. And she came home that night and said to me, "Honey, I have to talk to you for a minute." And I said, "Well, what's up?" And she said, "I have a touch of Alzheimer's." So I said, "A touch of Alzheimer's sounds like being a little bit pregnant." And she said, "Yeah, the school made me go to a doctor to be diagnosed with whatever it was." And that was the ending of it, because kids were getting lost at school. She was a budget administrator. She never did the budget. So she was going to be fired for cause. And that day before she went there, we went food shopping during the day. I went out to get the dry cleaning after that. She put the food away. And that's when I saw this white liquid coming down out of the cupboard and said, "Well, I wonder what this is." And I just pushed all the canned goods aside, and I found a deflated box of Breyer's vanilla ice cream. So that was such a pivotal point. I had to name the book Ice Cream in the Cupboard. That was the name that I came up with for that reason. But what happened ultimately, as I tried to take care of her, her case was very accelerated. She got very bad, very fast. And her sister, the two sisters and her brother also was stricken at the same time, roughly within
Oh
those
my
2 years.
gosh.
So it was 4 out of 4 siblings. And all
Yeah.
4 got in their 50s, all died in their 60s. And
Oh.
that's what I got the inspiration of saying, wait a minute, what goes on here? What is this about? I thought Carmen's case at 53 years old, diagnosis, was some kind of world record. I had no idea that these cases existed in their 40s and 50s and 60s and a very high degree. There are 200,000 cases in the United States right now under the age of 65. So that was the inspiration behind the
Yes.
book. I said, I've got to get out there. I've got to let the world know about this. I couldn't believe I had my awareness blasted to me, and I had to try to lay out something for the rest of the world. So I had the book even translated into Spanish, and
Yep.
it did okay. And but I was still, I guess, like every author says, boy, they should make a movie out of my book. And I probably felt the same way. And I was just going out on the West Coast. I was still working at the time. And Carmen was already under 24/7 care within 2 years of that diagnosis. That's how fast it accelerated. I couldn't get housekeepers to work for me. I couldn't get caregivers to work for me. She was at a daycare center for Alzheimer's. She punched out a 90-year-old man there. And we could have had a serious lawsuit because we would be responsible for her actions. And it was just one of the most horrible things. And I was going out to the West Coast, and I was sitting next to a person on the plane that was an author, and I was an author, and we exchanged books. And when he got back to Los Angeles, he read the book, and he called me, and he said, "You got to make a movie out of this. This is amazing. Nobody knows about this stuff." And that's how we got going. So this was so exciting for me because what it did was it gave me that extra piece of media that I needed to create the further awareness of this. And so I was just very happy. And I executive producer, so I financed the whole thing myself.
Yeah. And I saw that too when I saw the movie. And like I said, my husband and I, we absolutely loved the movie. We watched it on Amazon Prime, and I highly recommend to my audience, even if you don't have a family member with dementia, to watch this movie, because there's some scenes in it that are so realistic, and so like things I've had to do as a nurse's aide, as somebody, even with my own grandmother right now who's struggling with dementia.
Yes, I
there
heard
was
that.
the scene in the there was the thank you. There was the scene in the movie that where you had to go outside, where your wife thought that you were an intruder and you had to go outside. Was that something, I know sometimes there's hyperbole in movies. Was that something that really happened? And I'd imagine if it did, it probably happened often.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
that didn't actually happen. Or
I'm sorry, when you said I went outside?
yes, the scene where you had to go outside, wait a little while, and then come back in. Your wife
Oh,
thought you
yeah,
were an
yeah.
intruder.
Yes, that was the real story on that one was that I had simply come home from work. And this was at the very early time where Carmen could still be left alone. We had taken the car keys away. We removed the car. So we got that danger out of the way. And I just simply came home from work and walked in the door, and she came flying down the stairs and said, "You better get out of here. I don't know who you are, but my husband's going to be here, and he's going to kick your butt." And I just stood there. I says, "It's me." She went, I don't know who you are. What's me? What does that mean? And I just said, "Okay, let me try this." So I took my briefcase, my jacket, walked outside the house, and stood there for about 10 or 15 seconds. I walked back in, and I said, "Honey, I'm home." And she said, "Oh, great. Dinner's almost ready." In just those 10 or 15 seconds. So we put it in the movie in a little bit different form, but we wanted to get that event out.
Yeah. Well, that's something, I mean, I think any caregiver can relate to that moment of just step away for a minute or two and go back and just change the approach, or, that's a common thing with caregivers. And that particular scene really did resonate with me as far as that goes. So I'm glad that you did put that in there. I think it's great. Another question I have, forms of dementia early onset can take your loved one from you twice. I've said this before. Right now with my grandmother, she's really not doing too well with her dementia, and my mom and I have had the conversation about, you know, when she passes, what we're going to feel like or how this is going to be for us. And I feel like part of me feels like she's already gone. It's just her physical body, all the things that made her her. Do you have advice for people currently caring for a loved one with dementia as far as that feeling goes? And, you know, is that something your whole family experienced?
Well, I think, you said the key words right there, Sarah. The grieving takes place twice. And once when they're stricken with disease and they don't know you anymore, and you watch them just get progressively worse. And, most all the time, they're probably some of the softest people in the world with great personalities, and you watch their brain just eat away at them. And when Carmen passed that night, we were all alerted by the doctors at the nursing facility. They called me and said, "You better get the family together, because she has about 7 or 8 hours more to live." Mm-hmm. They were able to see that the organs were failing one after the other. Bladder, kidneys, heart was starting to go, and breathing. And so they know when that end was coming. And I did get everybody there. We had the 5 kids, and not 2 the way the movie shows, but we had 5. We were all there together when she passed. And when that happened, it was really almost a sense of grieving, but no more so a sense of relief. This is not what my wife would have liked to have seen happen to her. And yes. So there was a sense of relief when she passed, that it's over. And that's the way we felt. There were some tears, of course, but we had a good feeling about it too, to say that, okay, she doesn't have to suffer anymore like this. And that was 10 years from the day she was diagnosed. So it's a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. How did your family, because I know that dementia diagnosis doesn't just affect the person who lives with the person with dementia. I know it can become a whole family effort. How did your family react to this, and how did you guys work together? What did you do?
I'm sorry, I was a little difficulty hearing it again. But,
I'm sorry.
What did we do?
How did your family react together, like your kids? How did they handle the diagnosis in the beginning?
Well, it was shocking for everybody. We all went to. I took the kids with me. They were already older by this time now, and we sat down with the psychologist. And in the movie, you see where she was put into this cottage center where they had the meeting with the social worker and the doctor, and said that she had to be tested for those antipsychotic drugs. And that had to be done in a private facility, which would take about 3 weeks of 24/7 monitoring. And from that, they would determine the mixture of drugs that would be best to get her into some kind of a calm state, and hopefully take her home with a much calmer life. And maybe we could get back to some sort of living together. And on the final day, they came in and they said, "Your wife's case is so severe that we're recommending that you do not take her home. She go into 24/7 care immediately, because the drugs that we're finding here, we don't know how long they're going to work. They cannot be administered at home. If you're at home and she goes into convulsions, you're going to call 911 and they'll have no idea what to do." So that's what we highly recommend. So I took the doctor's advice, and a couple of the kids didn't like it. So one daughter tried to work with her at home, and then one day she said, I can't take it. I'm going out of my mind. Then she understood. So it was a very difficult time, and even with the other family members that had been stricken, arguments broke out between the core caregivers. One husband of one of the sisters, he refused all medication. He said, that stuff will work. It's just not nonsense. I'll take care of my wife, and that's it. Which is very dangerous. So it created a lot of problems with the family, but we all got through it, and the kids and I still have a powerful relationship today.
Yeah, well, that's great. And that's great that you guys did try to help each other out, and it sounds like everybody came around to support you after. And that's, I think that's really key with families that are going through anything like this, is family support. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. You need that, and this is why, the whole thrust here with ice cream in the cupboard is I can't do much about the disease itself, but that'll be up to doctors and medicine, and of course everybody donates money, and that's all very nice. But who's out there for that caregiver, especially the early onset caregiver, that's at such high risk for a number of reasons. First of all, being injured by the loved one, the stricken loved one. I was hit with plates, glasses. I mean, there was just a ton of things. I could have made this book a ton of violence put in it. It would just been a violence book. But I wanted to get a couple of key things in there so the readers and the viewers in the audience on the movie would get what was going on. So we have caregivers now, and I want to point out, can I point out a case in Allentown, Pennsylvania that just happened recently?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And back in March, I don't know, where are you located, Sarah?
I'm in Connecticut.
Okay. And up in the Northeast, we had a major snowstorm on March 3rd. And in Allentown, Pennsylvania, I'm on Long Island. And in Allentown, Pennsylvania, they had 27 inches of snow. And a woman in a home there, in her own house, got out of the house sometime during the night, probably wearing pajamas or maybe just a little coat or something, and went out in the snow. They don't really understand that they have to dress warmer. They don't understand that. She was an early onset patient. Now, she got about 8 blocks from her house from what the police could determine, and became completely disoriented as to where she lived. And at 4:12 in the morning is when the police were called. So that tells me that the caregiver that may have been with her, I don't know the final details about that, might have been in an exhausted sort of sleep. Maybe he thought his wife or his partner was just getting up to go to the bathroom, and she left. And so when he woke up, maybe, and found that she was missing, he called the police, right? But by 9:30, she was already buried in the snow. And when she was found, she was already dead. And that was from hypothermia. Yeah. So again, the caregiver probably in an exhausted state from trying to keep up with these. And that's the difference between the caregiver for the more of the elderly patient than it is for the young one, because they can move fast. And I always call early onset, it's like a light switch. It just goes off and they're gone. Something is going to happen in a second. And you don't see that with the elderly cases. Alzheimer's disease is awful at all levels. So that's why my concern is the caregivers for the early onset cases.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And again, I have seen this working in a dementia unit for so long. I've seen the early cases, the young people coming in, and how fast and agile and like just able to do everything. And yeah, it was tough. It's tough, and it's even harder when you have your loved one at home. Do you have any resources for support for anybody who might be caring for someone with early onset Alzheimer's? Do you have any resources? Or would that all be
as far as getting outside caregivers?
Yes.
Yeah, we do. There are some very good ones around. In New York, we have one called Home Instead, highly recommended people. And here's where I made a mistake, Sarah. I said, "Oh, this is good. We'll get her." This is before my wife started to beat up on them. But this caregiver came in, familiar with working with Alzheimer's patients, and she brought some games with her that were good for to exercise of the mind that she could play with Carmen. And I went, okay, this is good. Woman comes recommended. She worked with Alzheimer's people before. And I said, so then this is what I need. She passes muster with me. And so I went to work, and things were going pretty good. And but the only thing with this woman, she was a little heavy set and not in great physical shape. So I went, as long as she knows about Alzheimer's, I guess that's the most important thing. So 2 or 3 days into her working for us, I was driving home. I came home a little early that day, and I was passing a little construction thing going on in the street. Guys were digging a hole to change some pipes. And there was my wife standing there talking to these guys by herself. And I said, oh my God. So I got out of the car and I explained to these men, I said, listen, this is my wife and she has Alzheimer's disease. I said, I'm sorry if she said anything bad. He says, we were going to call the police. She seems like such a nice lady. And we didn't know what to do. Well, with that, around the corner comes our caregiver huffing and puffing. The caregiver went to the bathroom and Carmen took off like a rocket out of the house and gone. Knew how to open up the lock. See ya. So, getting a caregiver that's also in good physical condition, should something like this happen, they can move as fast as the patient is moving.
Yeah. Yep. I would definitely recommend that too. And one thing we have now that are great is locks with like keypad locks are more available now. Door alarms. I'm sure you had a lot of this stuff too, though. But I know our son is a wander risk with his autism, and we have door alarms. We also have a tracker for him, a GPS tracker that we just attach to his pants. And I've seen that for Alzheimer's patients.
Yeah, again, there are things, but what happens with the male? I think it's more the male caregiver for the female spouse. The early onset is generally spousal. Is that they have a feeling that, listen, this is my wife. I'm going to take care of her. We've been together all our lives, and I don't need a bunch of little toys and stuff like that. I'm going to take care of my wife, and I'll keep an eye on everything. So they really think they can cover all the bases because they don't see them coming. And that's one of the keys to the whole thing, is that you really have to take all of these sort of things. You need to put the caps on the gas stove so that you can't turn the gas on and off. Things like that, foot alarms for the door, that something loud goes off, like a barking dog sound or something like that. So you need to take those precautions. Sometimes men didn't, like in the case in Allentown that I just mentioned. That's probably what happened there. He had no idea she was even gone.
Yes, no, I definitely agree with that. And I think that it's hard to, sometimes if you don't know anything about this, you're not expecting it to come up. I've personally find people who have loved ones with dementia, younger, early onset or older, like you said, they don't know what to expect. They don't know what's coming next. And sometimes I find that there's almost a lack of information for people who aren't working in healthcare, who are taking care of someone with dementia. It's almost like they don't know where to turn. Like it's harder to find resources, especially for early onset. So do you think that there needs to be more advocacy for early onset Alzheimer's? And
I'm sorry, did I seek advocacy?
Do you think there needs to be more advocacy and more awareness for early onset Alzheimer's? And how is what do you think might be a great way to go about that?
Well, if I understand the question clearly, you're asking me about advocacy and Alzheimer's early onset.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm devoting the rest of my life to it. This is the way it just has to be. Not enough people in this country are finding out about this. So I put myself on the dementia groups on Facebook, and I try to help people in there, and going around and speaking, talking about the movie, and fielding questions from people that can get a hold of me, and discuss their cases. So I'm always going to be an Alzheimer's advocate, early or late onset.
And that's wonderful. Do you think that, like, the Alzheimer's Association, they have enough early onset advocacy on their website, or do you feel like there could be more?
To answer the question in one word, no. I think they're out there. I think you should register and check in with them and tell them about your case. That's where you can at least get recommendations on professional caregivers who might be best with this disease versus others. and check in with them. But I've seen on these organizations around the country, there are several big associations, and I don't see a lot of work for advocacy for the early onset caregiver or patient. So and they recommend where you might find a professional caregiver, but that pretty much at the end, there's no kind of meetings in that local areas. Some local people, like here on Long Island, the Sid Jacobson Center on Long Island, they have one of the most amazing early onset caregiver programs I've ever seen. We talked about giving that caregiver a break, which is so important. And
Yes.
they have their place, which is free. You can drop your loved one there. They have plenty of things to do. They're set up to handle early onset patients, and the male or the female caregiver can go out. The male can go play a round of golf, get out, see a couple of friends. The woman can get manicure, pedicure, get her hair done. Start being themselves a little bit. And these breaks over there, maybe 3 or 4 hours, are critically important for the caregiver's health. They need to have that little break. This constant pounding of the early onset patient just will wear you down. And case in point, here on Long Island, and the corporation that I was in, one of the other vice presidents that I work with came to me and he said, my brother's wife just was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and she's only 51. So I had watched the case as we went along and made some recommendations, and he quit his job. Bad news. Don't quit the job. You're going to need it, because this is not going to have a great ending. And he quit his job, and he took that macho man kind of thing that said, this is my wife. I don't need any help. And I said, Rick, his name is Rick. I said, he is walking right into where their immune systems start to fail. They're so run down, they start catching everything themselves. And I said, one of the biggest ones that I hear quite often is a heart attack at an early age, when this rundown condition in the state that these people are in. And 5 days after that, Sarah, that man had a heart attack.
Oh my
Fortunately,
gosh.
there were people nearby. He was able to get 911 and get help.
Yeah.
But if he wasn't, the wife has no idea what to do. She just climbs over him. So I wonder what's wrong with him. She's not going to call 911. She has no idea how to do that.
Yeah.
So that's why getting these messages out to the caregiver. Other caregivers, they lose a lot of sleep. We just had one I heard about down in Virginia. Guy lost control of his car on a highway, smashed into a tree, was killed. He's 52 years old. And no sign of drugs, no sign of alcohol. It was just like lost control of his car, and that's the way the police report goes, and it gets closed. A woman called me about a month later and asked me if I was familiar with that accident, and I happened to see it because I have family in Virginia. And she said, Mr. Moffett, that man hadn't slept in 3 days. He's an early onset caregiver. He fell totally asleep at the wheel. So that's how you lose another caregiver, by an area where we weren't really thinking about. So
Yeah. Wow. I've discussed on my podcast before caregiver burnout and resources and things like that. And as you've said, getting a break is so important, getting sleep. And I think caregivers altogether feel guilty sometimes for self-care. Do you have any advice on burnout as far as if you see someone starting to experience, what is your best tip?
The best tip is pretty much what I've said, is you have to take care of yourself. You are no good to a spouse if you get sick. You have to be able to ask for help, and ask for it early. Don't wait if you're seeing signs. Don't wait till signs get worse and worse and worse, and then finally give in. You need to get that help early. That's the biggest piece of advice I can get. Don't ever argue with a person with early onset. You're going to lose. Just kind of go along with what they want to do. It'll disappear in 15 seconds anyway. So those are the two biggest things. I learned for the doctor that handled my wife's case, Dr. Giselle Wolfkind, a wonderful doctor, worldwide known. She said to me, Mr. Moffett, this disease has been known to claim 2 victims, the caregiver and the patient. You need to take care of yourself so you're not one of them. That was the opening statement she gave to me after the diagnosis in our first visit. So everyone should learn from that statement.
Yes. And I appreciate you for sharing that with my audience, because I think that can never be said enough. You know, how hard it is, how exhausting it is to be a caregiver. And I also appreciate that you're, you know, devoting the rest of your life to help caregivers and to raise awareness for early onset Alzheimer's. That's amazing. You're a wonderful person doing this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How can my audience find you if they need more information?
I'm sorry, sir. Can you repeat
or
that?
if they want to read your book? I'm sorry. Oh, that's okay. Where can my audience find you if they need more information, or if they'd like to see your movie or your book?
Boy, sir, I'm having a real trouble hearing you.
I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Where can my audience find you if they need more information?
Oh, okay.
Like if they'd like to.
The best thing to do is send me a message through patmoffett.com. You can send me messages through my website, and you can see some things on there. And also, I'm in the Alzheimer's groups on Facebook. I can be sent a message through there. And
okay, great. And how about if they want to see the movie or get your books?
Getting the book is on Amazon. It's on the Kindle and print on demand. They say the book is always better than the movie, and this is probably the case with this, because there were so many other things I wanted to get into the movie, and time just wouldn't allow. We had to get to the core of the whole thing. So the movie is on Amazon Prime, free for Prime members, and it's on YouTube, iTunes, Fandango, Google Play, Apple TV, and various demand platforms that you can locate it on.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And again, I did watch your movie, and we reviewed it on Caregiver Chronicles sister podcast. I watched it with my wife. My husband and I, spoiler alert, we loved this movie. I think we both gave it a 10 out of 10.
I heard your review, and I thank you for that. That was amazing. You can't imagine how that lifts my spirits, and being on your show. Again, I've now reached out to yet another group of people that are going to get the awareness on that through you. And that's amazing. I love it.
Well, I'm incredibly grateful to have you on my show. Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you for listening to that. We're just, again, we're just so thrilled when you guys reached out to us to come on. It means a lot. So, but with that, I'm going to wrap up this episode. Thank you all for listening to this week's Caregiver Chronicles. Again, please reach out to Pat Moffett if you have any questions on early onset Alzheimer's, and we'll see you next week.